my fellow comic book collectors, it's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this video I kind of want to talk about the lingo that's used in comic collecting. You know, that we use like all these terms that people that are not familiar with comics might not be too familiar with. Like we use words like dollar bin, banger, grail, and we really don't have a definition for what those really mean. And so what I'd like to do is kind of quantify those terms. So I was kind of thinking, okay, how would I kind of place these terms in terms of how much the books would be worth? So for example, a dollar bin is pretty easy. It's pretty obvious. A dollar bin book would be $1 or less. It's, you know, in that kind of price range where it's something you would find in a dollar bin. Now, that doesn't mean that you won't find grails in dollar bins, because I've seen people, you know, they tell me all the time that they found some big book that's like a $10,000 book in a dollar bin. So that's the caveat to that one. But that does happen. It's rare. You know, for the most part, dollar bin books are worth $1. So that's the first tier in terms of the tiers. The next tier is a run filler. Now, when I say run filler, I have to be really specific about this, because people will say, well, there's some big run fillers. You know, if you're trying to like get a run of Fantastic Four from 1 to 5, and sure, there's a few that are not big key, like, well, actually, pretty much all of those are keys. But, you know, if you get certain runs, well, some of those runs are pretty expensive. What I'm talking about when I say run filler is I'm talking more, usually slightly more expensive than dollar bin books, but not ones that normally people are chasing after. They're more just but they're more books that are just filling that run. You just want to get books, you know, there's some issue that nobody really wants, but it does complete the set for you. So those are run fillers. Usually they're anywhere from $5 to $10 to $20 max. You know, they can even be dollar bin books. So, you know, really, those are affordable books that are just above the dollar bin. The next one would be minor keys. And these are books that are in that $20 to $25 range. And the reason I say that's in that range is those are the books where a lot of the time you'll say, okay, this is the first appearance of some third or fourth level character that nobody really cares about, but it is their first appearance. And sometimes those books become much more valuable if that character all of a sudden becomes popular. We saw that with the Guardians of the Galaxy, where all of a sudden those not so big name characters all of a sudden became very valuable comics. Same with the Eternals. Eternals have returned back to the dollar bin, but for a while there they were very valuable books. So these are the minor keys, the keys that might even have the first team up or first crossover. You know, books that are not super expensive, in that $20 to $25 range. And there's lots of books that kind of fit into that. The next book would be keys. So you got minor keys, now you got keys. Keys would be books that are a first appearance of maybe not a major character, but of a character that people would know. And these books can range from anywhere from $25 to $50. So still, you know, not the big books, but still, you know, but ones that people would go after and would say, hey, you know, I'm willing to spend like $50 on that book because it is a key that people recognize. Now, the next tier is a banger. Now, a banger is something where people look at it and they get excited. Now, it could be a great cover. It could be a key appearance that is a little bit cooler than those other earlier levels of key appearances, or it could be just you know, just something cool that people go, wow, that's a cool book, and that the expression people use is banger. I'm not a big fan of the term actually, but you know, it is what people use. And those books are usually anywhere from $50 to $100 from on the high end. And you know, people get excited by them, and they're bangers. The next tier above banger would be major key. So major key is that kind of bigger first appearance, where it's like maybe a first appearance of, I think of Cheryl Blossom in Archie. Her keys go for anywhere from $300 plus. There's certain characters that people really want to get their first appearances of, and they're willing to pay over $100. I would say even up to $500 for these key appearances, like the first Electro, or something where it's a pretty major character that people recognize, and they're willing to pay a little bit more for that book. So this is why it's called a major key. So it's anywhere from that $100 range on the low end, and to $500. Now, grade can really come into play on that, because those major keys, well, generally what you're doing is you're buying it at that lower grade to get it within that $100 to $500 range. And those major keys can actually be worth tens of thousands at the high end. So, it's really about how the book fits into the tier, rather than, whether or not it's really how much is that book worth, rather than how much is the most valuable copy of that book worth. So it's a major key because it fits into that bracket. Now, if it gets beyond that bracket, it's called a big boy book, where people are really, this is when collectors are paying big money for a book. They call it big boy books because it's either a high grade copy of some book, it's one that is highly sought after, and it's usually a major key at a high grade, or even a minor key at a high grade can be in this range. And I'm suggesting it's like that 500 plus. Okay, so if you're buying books that are $500 plus, well, those are big boy books, because you got to be a big boy to be able to afford them. And that's one of the terms that people use a lot, big boy books. I always think of like the diaper commercial, like the pull-ups. I'm a big boy now. Childhood memories. So big boy books are that 500 plus, maybe up to even $10,000. Those are that really high range on the big boy books, that it's $500 into the early thousands of dollars. The next level, going one higher, is Grail. Usually when people say a book is a Grail book, it is a book that is a major book, like AF-15, or X-Men #1, or something that's really a big book, and reasonably good grade, because it has to be in that maybe 10,000 plus of value. So when somebody says it's a Grail, well, it's usually a fairly expensive book, and it's one that people would recognize as something pretty substantial. So a Grail. So that's 10,000 to maybe 50,000 at the high end. Now, I came up with this term. Actually, a friend of mine came up with it. I shouldn't take credit for his idea. He came up with the term Super Grail, and that was my good friend Stephen Gettner. And he came up with this term Super Grail. And probably other people used it, but I'm giving him the credit. So Stephen mentioned that concept of Super Grail, which are books that are like that 50,000 plus range. So they're 50,000, maybe all the way up to 500,000. Like, so really, really big books. That would be like something like a Wonder Woman 1, or a Captain America 1 in a low grade, or Fantastic Four #1 in a mid grade or high grade. So these bigger books that people really do recognize as, wow, that's not just a Grail, that's a Super Grail, that's a big, big book. And then we have one more level, that top tier of books, and this is a term that I think as the Holy Grail. So whenever you think of the Holy Grail in terms of like, biblically speaking, it's that one book that, or one thing that is just almost unattainable. Very few have even seen it, and it's just something that everybody would love to have, but very few people will either see it or experience it or anything. It's just like one of those things that just, it's almost legend. And those are books that are in that 500,000 plus tier. And these are like, you know, Batman 1 in a high grade, or Detective 27, or Action Comics #1. These are the books that are like sought out by the whole entire community, and we want to buy it probably in that you know, super grail level, or you know, like where it's a little bit more affordable. But these are books that are high grade usually, and very, very rare, and very expensive as a result. So this is the categories that I've come up with. I'm curious what people think of these categories, if I missed anything that might be within those categories. Do you like this terminology? Do you like this quantification of the terminology? And I'll just quickly repeat the ones that I came up with. So there's dollar bin, run filler, minor keys, keys, banger, major key, big boy books, grail, super grail, and holy grail. So those are the terms that I came up with. I'd love to hear your opinion about this. I think it's just fun to come up with, you know, terminology and kind of add a little bit of that analytics to it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Please leave me feedback in the comments below. And if you want, I will try, I can't do all of these tiers, but I will try to show you examples of these books in a later video if you request it. So stay tuned for that. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.